Welcome back to List of. If you've spent more than 5 minutes on the internet, you've probably developed a healthy sense of skepticism. We've all seen those mind-blowing facts that turn out to be total fabrications, usually posted over a picture of a minion or a blurry sunset. But today, we're looking at the exceptions. These are the historical anomalies and scientific oddities that sound like they were cooked up by a bored teenager on Reddit, but actually stand up to the cold, hard light of academic scrutiny. Buckle up, because history is much weirder than your textbooks led you to believe. It's time for the list of historical truths that sound like internet myths, but aren't. First up, let's talk about Cleopatra. When you think of the Queen of the Nile, you probably picture her hanging out with the Great Pyramid of Giza in the background, maybe chatting about architectural trends. But here's the reality. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the launch of the iPhone than she did to the completion of the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid was finished around 2560 BCE. Cleopatra VII was born in 69 BCE. That's a gap of roughly 2,500 years. Meanwhile, she lived only about 2,000 years before the first moon landing in 1969. To Cleopatra, the pyramids weren't just old, they were ancient, crumbling relics of a civilization that was as distant to her as the Roman Empire is to us. She was practically a tourist in her own country, visiting monuments that were already thousands of years old. Our internal timeline of ancient history is usually just one big, blurry soup. But the truth is that the timeline of Egypt is so long it makes the rest of human history look like a weekend getaway. Next, we move from ancient royalty to the produce aisle. You've probably heard some fear-mongering about radiation in the modern world. But did you know that one of the most radioactive things in your house is likely sitting in your fruit bowl? Yes, bananas are naturally radioactive. Don't panic, you don't need a hazmat suit to make a smoothie. Bananas are high in potassium, and a small fraction of that potassium is the isotope potassium-40, which is radioactive. It's actually so consistent that scientists use something called the banana equivalent dose as a tongue-in-cheek unit of measurement for radiation exposure. To get actual radiation poisoning from bananas, you'd have to eat about 10 million of them in one sitting. At that point, the radiation is the least of your problems. The sheer physical volume of fruit would have turned you into a human-sized centrifuge of potassium mush long before the atoms started glowing. Speaking of things that feel like they shouldn't overlap, let's talk about higher education and the Aztec Empire. If I asked you which came first, Oxford University or the Aztec Empire, most people would guess the Aztecs. They feel ancient, while Oxford feels like a relatively modern institution for the elite. But Oxford is the senior citizen here, by a lot. Teaching at Oxford existed in some form as early as 1096. By 1167, it was a fully blossoming university. The Aztec Empire, on the other hand, wasn't even founded until 1325, with the establishment of the city of Tenochtitlan. That means Oxford had been grading papers and failing students for over 200 years before the Aztecs even broke ground on their first temple. In fact, by the time the Aztec Empire fell to the Spanish in 1521, Oxford had already been an established institution of global learning for nearly half a millennium. Now, let's tackle the big one. We've all heard it. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure visible from space. It's a classic. It's poetic. It's also completely wrong. Actually, the Great Wall is incredibly difficult to see from the moon. It's totally invisible, and even from low Earth orbit. It's a struggle. Why? Because it's not that wide, and it's made of materials that are the same color as the surrounding dirt and rocks. It has the ultimate camouflage. You know what you can see from space? Highways, airports, and large bridges. In fact, if the lights are on at night, you can see sprawling cities quite easily. The Great Wall myth actually started in the 1930s, decades before we even went to space. It was basically a hype train for Chinese tourism that everyone just collectively decided to believe without checking. Then there's Napoleon Bonaparte, the little corporal, the man synonymous with overcompensating for a short stature. History remembers him as a tiny, angry man in a big hat. But Napoleon wasn't actually short. At the time of his death, he measured 5 feet, 2 inches in French units. But French inches were longer than English inches. In modern measurements, Napoleon was actually about 5'7". For the early 19th century, that was actually slightly above average. So why the short reputation? A mix of two things. First, he was often surrounded by his elite guard, who were required to be exceptionally tall, making him look smaller by comparison. Second, British propaganda. The English cartoonist James Gilray spent years drawing Napoleon as a tiny, screaming child to mock him. It worked so well that 200 years later, we've named a psychological complex after a guy who was taller than the average Frenchman of his time. Let's get weird. If you look at the margins of medieval manuscripts from the 13th and 14th centuries, you'll find something baffling: knights fighting snails. It's not just one or two drawings, it's an entire trope. Dozens of manuscripts show brave, armored knights in life-or-death combat with giant, sometimes flying, garden snails. Historians aren't 100% sure why this was a thing. Some think the snail represented the Lombards, a group marginalized at the time. Others think it was a satirical jab at knights, suggesting they were so cowardly they'd pick a fight with a gastropod. Or maybe, just maybe, medieval monks just thought it was funny. Imagine a monk, bored out of his mind, copying the Bible by candlelight, deciding to doodle a knight getting bodied by a snail just to see if his boss noticed. Finally, let's stay in the Middle Ages for something even more absurd than snail combat: animal trials. In medieval Europe, if an animal committed a crime, it didn't just get a stern talking to, it got a lawyer. Between the 13th and 18th centuries, there are records of countless trials where animals were the defendants. Pigs were the most common culprits, often accused of wandering into houses and injuring children. They were arrested, put in jail with human prisoners, and brought before a judge. But it wasn't just mammals. There were legal cases against swarms of locusts and rats for destroying crops. In one famous case in 15th century France, a lawyer named Bartholomew Chassigny rose to fame by defending a group of rats. When the rats failed to show up for their court date, Chassigny argued that the rats lived in many different villages and hadn't all received the summons. When they missed the second date, he argued that they were too afraid of the local cats to travel to the courthouse. He actually won them a stay of execution. We like to think of history as a series of grand battles and serious speeches, but sometimes it's just a guy in a powdered wig trying to explain why a group of rodents can't make it to trial because of cat-related travel anxiety. History is proof that the truth doesn't care if it sounds believable. It's messy, it's weird, and it's full of radioactive fruit and litigious pigs. Which of these myths did you think was fake until today? Let us know in the comments. And if you have a favorite historical fact that sounds like a lie, drop it down there too. We might use it in a future video. Don't forget to hit that like button if you learned something today, and subscribe to list of 4 more deep dives into the stranger side of reality. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.